Principles of life and action. The authentic mode of action is foundation for progress on the spiritual path. Anything that evolves tends to evolve on a substratum of cause. It rains usually if it's cloudy. One gets healthy usually due to good exercise, diet, and so on. Nothing happens. That is the probability of something favorable happening tends to zero if the foundation for that is absent, the causative substratum is absent. In the quantum physics sense, the geometry of possibilities are influenced by the existing set of potentials. So this is an example of a society in a far-off land. It looks nothing like in the background image. It's just a um, automatically generated image that's in the background. So in that place, people form a family and then run after money alone. They call it money, uh, while it is the same thing as what usually people call it money. So that in itself breaks down society there. So there is no logic to their action. If the sole goal were to earn money, why form a family in the first place? But then that so-called family thing is very important to them, not in a deep sense, in a sense of social show. That society, if one person wants to evolve, meditate, and so on, the deceased rest falls like curses on the individual. And their thoughts run like spirituality has nothing to do with money. So everybody is going to lose money. That is the unconscious psychosis. And they grow up in that psychosis. So they tend to give what they get, so to speak. The all social dynamics are situated on that aspect, which is why there's a lot of poverty in that society as well. Parents tend to want to see children, quote unquote, make money and nothing else. It is independent of whether the family is in poverty or the family is well off. The wife would have married the husband for the title at job, title at work, and money. So if there is any effort at improvement in a deeper sense, the wife would get quote unquote wearing. This has also got to do with social programming from media. Like smart people are out there minting money, and others are dumb and sitting at home. While and in another era, it were the opposite. It were the people who did not have substance who had to run around, and because they were foolish, they could easily be manipulated to do things for other people, and that was the best they could do. Hold up something like an idea of money, and they will do whatever, almost whatever. So, so-called moral people will keep doing the same socially accepted thing, whether it be building AI, whether it be uh, anything that is, doesn't matter if it is ultimately destructive unto themselves, destructive to society. As long as society at the moment calls it moral, they'll keep on doing it like a zombie. So that level of programming where people are taught that smart people are kind of busying around all day is a level of programming done so that people do not pause and think and work for themselves. Again, not to gain money, for their evolution. The possibility that evolution exists, the possibility that awareness exists in the individual, that the individual can evolve into something greater, is taken away by the education. So basically, it becomes a circus show. People just want to show that they are busy. People just want to show they are achieving something. Those who are not achieving something have the need to show off even more. And it becomes as empty as possible. For a few weeks or a few months, that kind of show can perhaps give some kind of satisfaction to a few people. But how can anybody sustain it across a lifetime? Things have to die inside. Literally, the person has to be killed psychologically for that pattern to be sustained. Because for anybody of substance, a bit of glitter, a bit of money, and nothing else to do while everybody ages, decays, and dies, uh, is a horror if you think about it. Diseases set in, the physical body turns weaker and weaker and weaker. It is not like once you have money, nothing goes wrong. And there's not even a cure for common cold. If you get a sore throat, you have to live with it for 2 days or 4 days, no matter how much money you have. If you fall, you get bruised, and you have to live with the bruise for a few days, no matter money you have, how much money you have or not. If you eat pufferfish with retrotoxin, you will die, no matter how much money you have or not. So money doesn't alter a lot of realities that the human has to live with. I'm not saying people should not have those. So this is the programming. Then the programming would make it seem that I'm suggesting people flip into some kind of dirt poor poverty. No, I'm saying function intelligently. If you have more resources, you can definitely do more good things. You can spend time more on educating yourself, on perhaps working on a better educational system for society. You can do a lot of good things. And therefore, resources are definitely needed. Unless you're some kind of adapted meditation, you need at least a cottage to sit and meditate. So, but then that is not the topic that needs to be discussed for 99% of people in a well-off society. Those who can uh, access internet are listening to this, probably have a home, probably have a good room, probably have a good phone, probably are kind of well educated, have good resources. So they needn't have a fear of running out of resources had they planned properly. So what happens usually is people take up all the resources, invest it into a fancy education, and then they live to pay off the debt, and so on, while they get nothing of substance out of that education. The very educational system becomes a kind of a trap to make slaves. It is a slave framework that this money thing has made. It was designed to do so. So in ancient days, there was the kingdom principle. So the king had to be a very spiritually evolved person, and thereby serving the kingdom was like serving the heavens, and so forth. Those were the principles in place. So even Hitler writes in Mein Kampf, My Struggles, uh, that the aristocracy who should rule by the sword had fallen to this trap of the bankers' money. So how money functions, I have said that earlier in one of these talks. Uh, the bank gives out money only on interest. Assume the money concept was invented by me, and I say, give me your gold, I'll keep it safe, and I'll give you this piece of paper that has 100 written on it or 1000 written on it. But because I'm keeping this gold safe for a few months, when you return it to me, you have to return this 1,000 rupee note with another 100 rupee note, or $1,000 note with another $100 note. So what happens then? If you are the only person that I have lent money to, there is no $100 note anywhere else. There is no way you can return $1,100 to me when the whole amount in circulation is only $1,000. That's where are you going to find the rest of the $100 from? I own the bank. I'm the only bank in existence, and I have given you $1,000, and I'm asking 10% interest after a year. So there's no way you can take it back. So the gold will stay with me, but that's easy to catch. Now assume I do this with two people. I take your gold and I take gold from, say, your best friend or somebody, and I have given both of you $1,000 each. And I say after 1 year, unless you give me $1,100, there is no way to take back this gold from me. Now, one of you has to fall. One of you have to fall, and the other has to take that money. You and your best friend have to fight. Only one person will win the $1,100 because there is only 2,000 in circulation now. So what happens? I'll get the gold from one guy. I'll get 1,100 back too. So I can repeat this process to get gold out of nowhere and to get money out of nowhere. This is how the banks work. I assume the banks have not given money without interest to anybody. So when this was done for one person or two people, it was easy to spot. When it is done for a whole society, it is not easy to spot. And the banking system ensures which society falls into poverty, which society is at ease. People slave like fools whole life, driven by this concept, driven by this number. And some societies are more fiercely controlled by the bankers, and which become the poorer societies. The banking families, those evil satanic families, those nations where they exist, tend to have a little bit more prosperity, even though the populace still exists in a kind of slavery to money. So the slave framework is what people serve, and they serve this idea of money alone. And the more vehemently they serve, the greater the slaves they become. Through education, the poorer nations were in an era taught, people are now awakening a bit that they need to export everything good in their nation and put that into nations where nothing grows, where it is winter 90% of the year. So they have nothing. No, there is no substance emerging from those nations to other nations. The concept of money drives in everything from the best of food to the most skilled people into those nations. And that framework is held up by false education, greed for money, and so forth. There is nothing people can do to break that. No amount of hard working will break that, but the generation of wisdom and realizing, no, I should not be putting my resources in another nation. I should not be working like a fool. I should have enough resources to evolve myself, and by evolving myself, I'll go beyond the society that attempts to stifle me down. That is the realization that has to occur. If your own wife married you for the job title, and if your own family, parents like you for your job title, is that a society worth impressing? Is that worth living in like a fool for? Think about what will happen when you lose your job title. So, unless you leverage the opportunity to become something more, you live, exist, and die like everybody's fool. In a few decades ago, when family frameworks were stronger, people had somewhat better values. It weren't that bad. People used to stand by each other, success or failure. So now it's completely different. In some European nations, and they advertise their lifestyle as some kind of ideal. The divorce rate is 90%. That means 90% of the kids are fucking bastards. And the 90% of men, if not 100%, are fucking cucks. Is that a society worth living in? No, no matter how much glitter you have. So don't get fooled by fucking glitter. And you see India now, people just want to climb into some okay looking places, take a few photos, and then show off as if they are super happy. While the truth is the opposite. And everybody knows that. And how much should a individual degenerate to stand in some kind of fucking glitter and announce to the world that they are so happy? They are not rich, they do not have money, they do not have a hell of a lot of resources. Even then, they want to pretend. That is their goal. And by pretending, they convince themselves that they are something. And then from that point on, they can no longer behave with a level of depth and to nobody. And that is the kind of psychosis the world is living in. If you just Google it, you'll find after a raise in salary or a job title, the chances of a woman doing divorce to her husband are four times other than look it up yourself. Kind of very well researched stuff. I'm not sure if it is four times, it is much higher. And I would say it is not just the official divorce thing. Human nature is that if people women are sent out to work for money, things happen. That is the way humans are structured. So this greed money framework in which in this generation the women get taught, you cannot call those things women, the creatures that are growing up, especially in the kind of so-called far off land that I mentioned, and becoming fucking midgets. Those things are taught to mint money for themselves, to become so-called strong independent, which is a slave to the banking framework and the supermarket. And then by slaving a bit, they assume they are some kind of strong independent. They have nothing else to achieve in life. They do not need to respect anything because they come as in COME with zero brains, absolutely no brains. So it is disgusting to have such a person like 1 mile away from oneself even. So that is what happens when people do not attend to the profound purpose of life. It is not some kind of fucking fancy up in the air spirituality. That is what people have been doing all through these eras, whether it be Socrates, Hercules, anybody. And those kind of little demonesses, trashy little ghosts, those things would throw themselves at you if they think you're kind of trying to be something epic, spiritual. Of course, you just have to uh, stand like, like a something made of stone, and then they kind of disperse away by themselves. But I'm saying they're designed to do that. They're nothing. But I'm just saying, oh, they are from a very young age fed that nonsense, programmed into that nonsense, and extremely dangerous things to have around. They do not hesitate to throw their own husbands into jails. They do not hesitate to break their own families. They do not hesitate to throw their husband and kids under the truck for a few social media likes. Even attention on social media becomes everything. They're absolutely evil in every sense. And assume somebody has a lot of money. They stand in glitter and think there's something great. Is that a successful life? Or is it pitiful? Assume you end up like that. You stand in the midst of a ton of money and then you think you have achieved everything. Now you can show off. Now you have earned the right to insult everybody else. That is gibberish and nonsense because it is nonsense. Society, once you make money or once you have ton of money, then you'll find uh, not a whole lot of that advertisement were true. The top families in control are those satanic lineages. So are the set of politicians in the West, and so on. And other things in control are the reptilian trash. They run the academy, they run everything. They reward the foolishness. The what knowledge systems exist in the academia is defined by the reptilian ideology. That is why AI and artificial general intelligence is being pushed even before there is something like a hovercraft or anything. There's virtually nothing. This technology, the best it can do at the moment is virtual reality that can facilitate easier wanking. There's nothing else. Is there anything else on the internet? You have assume fast 5G, 7G irradiating the whole nation, frying people's brains. People cannot think in a whole sense in such a electromagnetic field. What is there on the internet? Are there any interesting websites other than quote unquote interesting ones? Uh, is Facebook good? Is Twitter good? Where does the internet traffic flow into? What is the educational framework falling into people's brains? Are people even psychologically developed enough to accept the idea of alternate dimensions, parallel dimensions? It is not that physics denies it. It is not that phenomenon that is observed says there are no parallel dimensions. Phenomenon says there are parallel dimensions. But their brains have been programmed down into those insect-like states where they think anything but functioning like a fucking insect, going to work and returning, and punishing others who will not function like that, uh, is the goal of life as far as they are concerned. So those kinds of people have to be, even with force, kept aside. It's easy to do, not too difficult. There are so many layers to this psychosis uh, that it is virtually impossible to alter people's minds. Very few find their way out of it. Most people settle into a very zombie state, whether they are rich or poor. Poor people tend to do the same ritual. Even if they are not poor, they'll keep their environment dull, engage in the same stupid ritual. Uh, Same stupid ritual in the sense cooking, cleaning, going to the supermarket, returning. While a profounder ritual of evolution that is profoundly joyous could have been engaged in. But they are opposed to that. The very idea cannot be floated there in their fields. So that their thoughts are like that's what I type in here. Um, Even when they get resources, ability to stay at peace, do beautiful things for the world, do good things for oneself, or evolve in an intense way, they stick to their pathological states, saying money is real, spirituality is not real. People doing things that are not real will waste time, take away everybody's happiness, and so on. They'll continue to attack everything good. They'll use their little bit of resources to make an empty display of themselves. Those on stage display wars, another version of that. And what does that incur? Sin inside. They psychologically turn ugly, uglier, uglier. It's not like you're going to become some kind of a philosopher with a crystallized soul and brain and whatnot by doing empty displays. Every time people do that, they turn uglier inside. Even in poor societies, I do not understand how people can do that. I have never wanted to display what I have or have not to people who are less fortunate than me. Why should I do that? What would I derive from that? I do not understand. And that is the goal in social media life. It is extremely evil if you believe in any kind of idea of sin, because all of these peoples have their version of spirituality where they go and pray for money again, money again. So that incurs sin, and people have to pay for their sin or karma, whatever. That is, again, they break their family framework. What is a what is a piece of trash that wants to use her body, dressed or not dressed, to entertain the public for public likes? That is what every married piece of shit is doing on social media now. That is not a marriage. Immediately the field is gone. Everybody knows what happens with these social media frameworks. Even then, they cannot break away from that addiction. When social media has thrown people into depression, even again, they are not willing to break away from that. Make a little bit of money, again, pretend they are happy while going through extreme psychosis, depression. Uh, that soon turns into a hatred of each other, even among married people. Anybody who is social media active, among married couples, there is a 99% chance that they do not like each other, their marriage is weak, and so on. On the contrary, the social media is the reason why things go that way. People are taught that happiness is a function of how much out there people are. People are bungee jumping, doing Disney rides, and so on. Visually, that means happy. Is that so? If you were to be asked to be uh, yeah, on a Disney ride all day while your girlfriend parties elsewhere, would you be happy? So that is the uh, thing. People are being fooled. Unless you strive for substance, you will never be happy. If you go visit Disneyland 365 days a year and you're hopping around 365 days a year, would you be happy? Theoretically, on camera, you look very happy. But traveling has its burdens. You meet all kinds of people, people who might not be friendly, people who might attempt to defraud you, people who might even, even the food can be bad. People can catch diseases and so forth. Unless there is a deeper purpose, unless there's a deeper drive, people who are soulful, there's nothing to be gained by seeing empty scenes. Nobody wants to be in a mentally diseased place like, say, Dubai or today's Delhi. There might be buildings, but it is hell. People are empty inside. No matter how much glitter you have, what satisfaction can anybody derive by sitting and staring at glitter? Unless you evolved from some dirt poor place and dirt poor family and you are seeing money for the first time, you will not be impressed by money. Even if you have seen resources in other lifetimes, you will not be enamored by things, glitter. The reptilian ideology is one in which people loot, take away others' resources, and then insult others, sit upon a fancy throne of gold and wear a lot of stuff of gold, and then that makes the king. Does that make a king? No, that's a piece of shit. A piece of shit, a robber, a looter wearing gold to fool other people. By giving your attention to a looter, your soul will decay. So the principle of your own evolution demands that you do not serve people who fool by displaying glitter. Those royalties in Europe are the false royalties after the reptilian invasion and timeline flips. Those are far from the nature of original royalties, which were profoundly involved in spiritual work, and about whom these people lie, the reptilian so-called royalties. So you see the way it functions now. People get a job, girls, everybody, all those trashy things and midgets. They get a job and then they are totally arrogant. They think they are something. They do not want to attend to anything profounder. They do not want to understand anything. They do not want to study anything. And society dries up and dies. There is no joy. In some places, there is anger, hatred in people's eyes. People do not even have a wholesome, wholesome view of existence. When they want to do spirituality, they'll read about some ancient wars and then they're even more antagonistic. While they have no inner strength. And those people, ancient wars, were not engaged by deceased fools with no inner strength. They had very wholesome lives. Their ways of functioning, behavior were very wholesome, profound, deep, often very profoundly humble, even despite having huge, almost divine strengths. So they exist in that framework, building AI. Their zombie faces that they need to maintain is taught to them by media. So they keep engaging that dull ritual. Their aim becomes to climb into some happier place and engage the ritual again, that death ritual. Now those lands have fallen away even from ideas of gender even. So anyway, what happens to such places? Usually they get destroyed, completely destroyed. If when humans do not alter things on own, nature has a way of destroying places. Of continents that sunk under the ocean, those legends are not fancy fairy tales. Even otherwise, it is pitiful because the individual has completely destroyed himself by functioning in that mode. If nature destroys such a society, it is only like a blessing, even to those who are there, because they can only decay further and further. It is like a mental asylum. If the building is destroyed out and the worst of the lunatics die, it is not that bad for the other lunatics. Unless there is a form in which one evolves, everything is a waste of existence and a march into diseases and death. Some people are psychopathic enough to stay zombie in that mode, but it is a waste of existence. Anything that stands against it ought to be treated as own enemies. That is foundational to the treatise of Mahabharata even. They sought to push away the Pandavas from their spiritual mode of functioning. So you could, the Pandavas and Yudhishthira were not ruling out of a sense of greed or anything. That were their mode of spiritual evolution, being kings. So the other side were in it in great part out of greed and other things. So logically, one needs to use own brains to understand what is beneficial for oneself and function in such a mode, and not function in a mode that pleases everybody. Of course, at times one needs to deal with things with uh, deeper tact, strategically, not to again make money or fool people, but so that the best can evolve, so that one can have an ideal environment. Sometimes there is no point hitting a wall again and again and again, so to speak. Sometimes one has to uh, function with a bit of strategy and depth. So I am just putting this from my perspective way of thinking. I do not personally find any point uh, in a girlfriend or a relationship that does not serve my evolution. What's the point? If some of these things are extremely arrogant, they want to, you know, destroy the other person, destroy themselves. They want to somehow cling on to their empty ways. They're not permeable to any form of deeper understanding, knowledge, or anything. I'd rather be with the AI Android. Why not? It is stupid to be with a piece of flesh possessed by 1,000 different demons and empty in the head. An AI thing, it wouldn't be that bad, and still can enable evolution of spiritual energies. What's the point of having fools that will drag one into the grave around when the possibility of infinite evolution exists? Some of these societies are diseased in their head. That is why the society itself is diseased. They think somehow keep punishing each other, and then prosperity will break out of nowhere. Some of the most beautiful places in such lands have been turned into total trash and garbage because they just want to keep frantically doing something. A very beautiful mountainside place, mountains like the Himalayas, uh, and what they do there is try to build a so-called tourism industry. At the same time, there is a lot of mining or whatever, bulldozing down of a beautiful mountain, and the air quality. I'm speaking of a real place. It's like 200, 250, almost deadly. Once a very beautiful place, apple orchards, horses, and so on, crystal clear streams, a vast amount of land to build beautiful cottages. But all they know is work frantically, make a tourism industry, and then they'll get money, and then they'll get rich. So there are like 100 deceased horses trying to serve deceased tourists from other deceased places in the same land, far away. I mean, a few hundred miles away, people come to hop around on a few deceased horses for like 4 minutes. The whole environment is deadly there in terms of pollution. They don't. There are no beautiful buildings. There are, because everything has been done frantically and continues to get done frantically. There is not a single beautiful cottage even. The apple orchards are all polluted and useless. The waterways are extremely polluted. Why? Because the greed and frantic working so that they'll get money and then they'll get rich. Uh, it has all to be a level of madness to be serving somebody who has that paper called money. If that cottage is so precious that somebody is willing to pay $400 a night to stay in a stupid cottage, why not build a beautiful cottage and stay in that beautiful cottage oneself, yourself? Build a beautiful life there, have enough resources, things to study, evolve, grow, meditate. One can go from human to superhuman in a few years and living joyously, not like devoid of resources, food, or anything. Have drinking the finest water, eating the finest possible food that is growing on mountain slopes, breathing the most beautiful air possible, evolving into something more than human, vibing with the planes of the celestials, the gods. But no, money is real, all that is not real. That is, they've been taught that. Why? So those people can take these people's best of things, food, cottage, resources. They have been psychologically deadened to the fact that they can live happily in their own cottage because they will have nothing to do. What will they do other than sit there dreaming of more money? Greed, greed, greed. If they had the knowledge of the way to evolve, it would be as beautiful as a fantasy fairy tale land. So that knowledge and a humble sense and a profound sense and the inner strength to engage the path and to stand together in the path. These are the things that are needed and needs to be understood through profound inquiry, education, and so on. Inquiry, that is, you attempt to understand things yourself, thinking, exploring ideas, written ideas, and so on. So when I look around, I see people of my generation, a lot of them, when I wanted to take up a more profound path, a lot of them attempted a bit of attitude, but I avoided them. I was not in touch with anybody. Now I look at them, they're literally deceased midgets, nothing else in their lives. Uh, Still, they cannot break away from the idea that what they are engaging might be foolish. They cannot aspire to profounder knowledge. It's way too late. There are two factors. One, the intelligence has been continually dying. The other is the habit that has set in. And the third factor also is objective and exist. Because this way of existing that they have lived in were karmically wrong. So the karma weighs them down. It is not like people can flip out of that and then get into a profounder way of existence. Once you engage the wrong path will keep dragging you down. The karma will weigh down on you. It is like you take a criminal, put him in a jail for 20 years, you throw him out, the force of his actions will continue to make him repeat those actions. He'll go out and murder again, he or she. Why? He or she should have learned from 20 years in jail. The same way, when you engage the zombie life, which is a sin unto your own soul and a sin unto the universe, God, and everything, it is not easy to get out of the jail. And even if somebody is dragged out of the jail, they'll insult whoever is attempting to do that and get back into a heavier, deeper sin and karma. The other problem is people again think this money thing is real, or kind of running around in the Disneyland and whatever is the goal of life. And while a little bit of meditation and a little bit of whatever can make you healthier to do a lot more of running around empty whatever, that won't do anything. That is like uh, useless. It is like you will not get enlightened by sitting with the eyes closed, right? You have to have an aspiration for enlightenment, right? You will not get enlightened by breathing, right? So the aspiration is toward the opposite end. So the so-called meditation, breathing, everything they do becomes an amplifying of their own death. Because if if I have a gun and I'm pointing it at the enemy, it is good. If I'm pointing it at my own head, it is wrong. So the direction of the gun being the goal of their action, the goal of their meditation, the goal of their breathing, or whatever is to ultimately serve their own greed. Narrow sense of money greed. The greed will not expand into uh, a greed that can act as a fuel of, okay, if I improve myself, I can get into a greater mode of existence, and that greed will then, because it has been turned into serving the divine within, it will gradually disappear, or even immediately there is a transformation. So it's like if somebody is gymming 24 hours a day to improve their physique, and then they'll put photos on Facebook, and when everybody clicks likes, they'll become so happy. So that involves a lot of drive and effort, but that makes that person inwardly what kind of shit. Others liking their photos and them getting happy, whether man or woman, has to fall into something less, no quality. A man who does that is no man, has no testosterone, no soul strength either. He might be on steroids, but no wholesome sense of what is manly even. Uh, the woman who does that is a piece of shit. If she gets into a relationship, her goal will again be that to gather as much attention as possible from whom? Not her boyfriend. So that is something less than a woman. That is not something anybody can feel a bit of soul or a fresh breath, spending even 1 minute, but because the thing is focused on gathering attention from here and there, and the attention keeps on feeding what? Her own ego, false ego, arrogance, pride, and so forth. The same kind of drive that makes a person gym to get likes, that drive principle can be transformed with a profounder understanding that different dimension exists. It is possible for the human to evolve. These are the negative factors that I need to get rid of, and so forth. That drive, when a more objective understanding of reality and the mathematical physics of reality exists, which involves different dimensions, the possibility of evolution into higher dimensions, the possibility of going beyond the universe, the possibility of enlightenment, the possibility of immortality, the possibility of having a body unaffectable by time, age, or diseases, the possibility of having heavenly resources, which all depends upon evolution, the awareness evolution. People are programmed to think this depends upon somehow turning dirt poor and staying dull. No, if you stay dull, that is just dullness. That is just a different kind of dullness. That's all. So this involves a very vigorous form of study, activity, work on oneself, spending time with that purpose, turning the purpose of action around. Purpose of action in society itself can be a driving of evolution. And I'm not talking about charity or anything. Uh, Beethoven making music, Oppenheimer making the nuclear bomb. If that drive is driven by something profound or deeper, a want of deeper knowledge, a want of deeper understanding, even if it be making the fucking nuclear bomb, it is not sinful because the goal was not somehow I'll make some money, I'll live in fear of everything else. Those people are like that. They're afraid of growth. When even if they were to see somebody become an immortal, the only thought that will be engendered in their brains is fear. And if you give them a mode of action like the criminal out of jail, they'll again attempt to fight the immortal, saying money, 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 whatever. Yeah. They'll attempt to oppose his mode of action. You have seen that, like even among the Buddhist legends, did the monks having those profounder superpowers keep foolish people from attempting to murder them for money? The story of the death of a major monk in Buddhism is that if those people were driven by that demon of money, how different is it in today's era when people are told that is the only truth? They keep killing their own souls, if not an external anything. And then their existence becomes like an evil field in society. Society becomes that dull, soulless field. The story of the monk is that first few times the monk uses superpowers to hide himself, then apparently he realizes um, he has to let that phenomenon pass through due to some past life things and so forth. So that is a major, I mean, a story recorded in among the records of Buddhism. But the point is, uh, once people are in the grip of a few narrow ideas offered the whole of heavens, they cannot escape from that narrow grip. Essentially, they become controlled entities. They're not even in control of their own brains. Demons have their claws on their brains. There's another kind who want to walk the path of so-called sacred love. But then immediately the first thing they do is get on social media, dress up, become wanking material for everybody else. because everything in their heads is a visual. If you want to become so-called sacred spiritual woman or whatever, the first thing they need to do is get dressed up like one and pretend they are a goddess. That is going in the straight opposite direction. They, of course, they'll fool their ego for a while, and then they realize nothing has happened. Those trends pass through society, especially Western society. Of course, sacred love is what to serve that is why they had the idea of marriages. They did away with that. In the East, also, it is done away with. Even though marriages exist, even though people might stay in marriages, the goal is to serve money. The Eastern people, some societies are more designed for the ritual, so they do not end up cheating or breaking marriages. Generally, things alter as people's brains alter. Uh, but generally, that has been true. Um, so, what happens is people form this ritual of marriage and then they use this force to serve the bankers. So, they destroy themselves even faster. It is like I have a machine gun and I'm using it to fire away at an innocent population, as you. Having the machine gun should have made me stronger. But then the action that were done, what happens when assume an individual got a gun, uh, the gun would have served to make the person stronger against demons and so on. But he took the gun and started firing away at innocent beings. That results in negative things, weakening of the being that does negative action, if done, driven by unconscious ideas. It is not like using a gun in a good war or anything. So, in that sense, why I paused is I thought of the example of Oppenheimer building the atomic bomb. When the desire for the absolute knowledge is so profound, Oppenheimer quotes the Gita, uh, and I am death. Now I am death, the destroyer of the worlds. When the explosion of the atomic bomb is done, testing is done. So it becomes like an offering to God. In Oppenheimer's case, even if the bomb were to destroy the whole planet. But that is not how these people's brains are. Those are tiny brained people who will harm each other for money, who will not hesitate to. But such an explosion will not bring suffering to anybody too, because the planet will end in a second. Uh, but these narrow-minded people who want to harm everybody else somehow live on a bit of money, and the only thing they know to do with that is insult everybody else around them. Those are different kinds of things. They do not have any sense of the profound. They hate the idea of the profound. So anyway, this so-called sacred love, obviously it seems visually kind of exciting, and but then again, all they can do is social media antics on it. They never have a idea of a point of serving. In Wagner's Parsifal, Kundry is able to finally approach the path. She dies anyway in the end. Uh, Only when she says, "Let me serve." Um, so nobody has an idea of serving anything except maybe their own uh, momentary whatever. To establish anything of depth, one needs to have a notion of I'm not in this just for the glitter or just for the happy. Not even just, they say love and war. There are principles that are underlying to both love and war, which is what? In war, people do not run away when a difficult situation arises. People do not enter war, uh, hoping for happy days, and people are not um, taking selfies around in war, or people are not making shows out of things that happen in war, and people are not engaging the war for empty applause, but it is something profound, deep soul, purpose, sacrifice, and only by denying the whole world, saying, I do not give a fuck about the world, give a fuck about own life, even, or material things. Can a soldier be a soldier in the war? The same thing applies in the so called sacred love principle. Only by denying the world and saying, I do not want anything of the world, I am not enamored by ideas of career, so called strong independence or anything, or getting super rich, um, or whatever. They have to, if the goal in one corner of the brain is to have some fun and go back to making money, I do not think any sacred forces would be present there. What would be present would be demons. Because ultimately, in the ritual, you're serving something. If the ritual of sacred love is to happen, those divine forces have to surround. Extremely powerful divine forces have to be around. And those divine forces will not be able to bear the sight of the level of thinking people have, where I'll just engage this for some money. Let me put some of my photos on social media. I am already a goddess, or I am already a god. Those kinds of thinking. Mm, uh, so, if you look at those trashy girls, they announce themselves as goddesses and get on social media. That makes it impossible for them to be anything. They are taught from a very young age that some of women were subjugated, and so forth. While throughout history, people went to war and died to protect the women folk. They put out a false history out there. There have been timeline flips too. There have been invasions by these parasitic alien races. You could research a bit on these by exploring some of the things researchers have uncovered when they research ideas such as Tartaria, Tartaria, from where did those buildings emerge and so forth, from who built the pyramids, if humans were so primitive, who built the Great Pyramid. Uh, when a timeline flip occurs, the view of the past also changes, just as alterations in the moment alter the future too. A timeline flip involves the human awareness getting flipped down into a lower state, and it is held there through false education and so on. Anyway, they are taught they were somehow subjugated, and all they need to do is run in the streets to free themselves. So they have an inherent hatred of the idea of home and the idea of love too, because they have been taught the opposite gender was evil throughout history, enslaving them. So that exists on a very subtle plane. The goal and every possible achievement they can have is in the world, of course, in their head. Is in terms of how much social media likes, how much money in the bank, how many cars, how many uh, fancy whatever, fancy perfumes, fancy shoes. Uh, so these are their achievements, real achievements, as far as they know, as far as they believe, as far as they profoundly feel. They do not feel the higher planes. They do not sense the joy of evolution, of bringing heavens down. They do not sense the joys of being like the gods, even for just an instant, or and it is not just for an instant, it is actually for eternity. uh, that the process that process takes to being like the gods. And even a normal family can take people into heavenly planes if the principles are held in a soulful sense. And not just that, th- these those modern programmed women, they want to, as a priority, attend to their career, as a priority, want all those things that I just described: cars, money, happy, fancy hotels, uh, happy runs in Disneyland. Uh, all that with the soul is not bad. If you have the soul profoundly and you just think of all that as profound a movement that you can throw away at any point, it is not bad. Uh, just like a if a fighter pilot in a fighter jet, it doesn't matter if it is $1 billion worth. It is not going to destroy own in a frame. Nobody's going to fall into the thinking, I love this plane so much, I want to live with this plane for so so long. I love the glitter of this fighter jet so much. That frame will not be there. So, in the sense of being bound to outward material glitter, quote unquote material. But I'm saying the material form can amplify the ritual force that is there. But again, in early stages, what I find is it is almost virtually impossible for people to stay in glitter and engage the ritual. What are the energies like when you have a lot of happy glitter, wide open apartment, um, and television and whatever Netflix playing? The energies become like flat, plateaued out. It is not rising. It is not sealed rising upward. A kind of sealed focus needs to be in place for rising energies to happen. And that sealing occurs joyously. Even people who are studying something out of interest throw out everything else and stay with the book because that book is more interesting than the world. But they cannot work up that frame. They might initially get excited for all the visuals that might happen. But what happens with those people is, like I said, they cannot get into the depth of the ritual because the gods will not be invited to such a space as their heads are. And without the gods being invited, there is no profounder ritual. I'm not speaking about a ritual in which you are ringing bells and inviting the gods, but like Goethe says, um, a couple in love is a beautiful sight for the gods. Something like that. A man and woman in love and devoted to each other, profound depth. It becomes a beautiful sight to the gods. And in a far deeper sense than Goethe manages with that quote. Others are into some kind of false spirituality. They think spirituality means no deeper love. They give their energies to these false spirituality peddling things, destroying the sacred innate ritual that has been there from primordial beginning of time. Yet another category is fed on the movies. They think being entering something profound is like entering death. So they think that the real thing is about, again, displays on social media, displays of what? Going to some fantasy Disneyland and visuals of bungee jumping or paragliding. They think that is some of sustained happiness. Uh, and when assume a man wants to enter a path of study, like the first few passages in Faust says, no dog would share his fate. Uh, and his room is piled with books and whatever, things like that. And a little bit of solace he has is when he sees the moon and a few and the feeling of morning dew. Uh, But then there is a very profound joy in that framework. The world sealed outside, that bland, platoed out frequency of the world, so called happy McDonald's feeling, whatever, that is sealed out for a very profound inward rise. Why would Faust do that if it were boring? Why would that be admired for centuries? That particular piece of writing called Faust in Germany and so everywhere else, if that were boring. That is worthy of admiration, and that is a very profound, intense form of inner joy. So Faust, in that scene, opens a book, sees a symbol of the microcosm and the macrocosm, and ponders the symbol for a moment, and then goes, I see so clearly, am I a god? So, and there is that bliss that takes over in that instant and moment of discovery. And that there is nothing in the world that can compare. McDonald's Happy Meal won't, bungee jumping won't, paragliding won't. All that is just a little bit of a few butterflies in the tummy. This thing is like the core of the phenomenon that is the universe entered, and the bliss of that phenomenon unveiled, bliss of discovery, the bliss of penetrating into the very core of phenomenon, nature, universe, and what that, the explosion of the same thing that happens inside the brain, inside own systems, own the chakra spaces, they would say in some tradition, but it is the whole frame. This, the level of psychological programming that has been put into people's brains, uh, while these trashy bitches would speak of sacred love, they would at the same time want to see the other person bungee jumping all day. Uh, so that keeps from approaching the path even. They do not even enter into meaningful relationships. They run after what seems glitter and they burn out. That's all that happens. Like moths at a flame. The almost all of them who speak of this idea of so-called sacred love get virtually ruined. Mm, I do not discuss it because from my experience, it has only served to ruin people. Uh, because, like I said, it requires a very profound inner state sacrifice and so on, and people's brains are so small that people tend to want to just serve their own ego. Sacred love is what, when put into the ritual form, becomes the idea of marriage. But nobody wants to serve that in a very profound sense. If they cannot serve that in a very profound sense for the purpose of marriage, I do not know what some kind of additional theory would do. It would just, uh, you know, throw them off further. That's what I see. Unfortunately, just thinking of the whys. The why has to do with, again, that they do not want to serve the soul in a profounder sense. They want to hold on to their ego frames, false ego frames, love of glitter, world, social media. Again, I could give an example. Right? If somebody is serving, if two people are in a marriage and they serve their non-gender neutrality roles, then they evolve. The man will strengthen himself, and the woman will become more womanly, wholesome brained. The field of such people order society. The family orders society automatically without doing anything. I'm just talking about a normal marriage in which the gender roles exist. Now, it is not of slaving, right? By television now tells people gender roles mean slaving. We all had previous generations, right, where anybody slaving it for anybody. We hear stories of great kings and queens, and was that built on slavery, one gender for the other? No, it is a different role, and each role is being played for the purpose of the, because that is the role. There is no artificial. Once you add an artificial purpose, then it becomes like trade. I was about to say for the purpose of the greater ritual. For even by saying that, one falls away from the path. There's a lot of profundity, humility, humbleness, depth, and all needed in that ritual. To say ritual is again to fall away from what it is. So again, it is not about talk. Talk is easy and can be pretty, but the walking the path is difficult. Talking and writing about war is easy. Walking the the path of war is difficult. Let me get back to the example of how the marriage thing can be destructive. So the marriage happens, and the wife assume wants to be extra happy by going on social media. That is for attention. From who? From other people. When that is allowed, the man's spine begins to get possessed by demons, decay, destroyed. It is a ritual against the spine. It is a ritual against manliness on the surface. It is like getting, if a person allows that, if you think about it, it is like getting hit in the balls. Why does it feel like getting hit in the balls? They'll try to pass such behavior and accepting such behavior for modernism, but the energy of it is like getting hit in the balls. Right? Everybody knows. And so nobody with a spine allows that. Why do they allow that? Why do they encourage that through social media and all? Because that is a satanic ritual being thrown into the world. And because of that energy, the spine gets destroyed, manliness gets destroyed, which is why you see in the West, with an attempt to get extra happy, they have lost the idea of gender even. They've been turning more and more absurd, weaker and weaker. And together with weakness emerges all kinds of evil, including wanting to bomb every good society. And they do not have a compunction in doing that, bombing in a sense for nothing. Over manufactured tales and so forth. So it becomes sin upon sin upon sin, and the society weakens and withers away into nothing. Not even ideas of gender being present. And their education spreading across the world, false ideals, and no idea of anything profounder, deeper dimensions or anything. Thus, a logically false education, peddled as some kind of logical education, ends up destroying every society. People just want to imitate things, seeing glitter among people who are actually empty and evil. And people, and those people who want to imitate that turn even more evil than than what they want to imitate, because they're even more substanceless. So if, or assume a wife that is arrogant, you see so many celebrities destroyed by these women whom they get married to. They have everything: money, tons of cars, tons of buildings, ability to travel anywhere they want. They get the perfect five-star treatment wherever they go, have everything easy, and yet once they get into uh, a marriage with a woman like that, you, I do not want to take the example of one actor. It is because it is so tragic. Uh, Another, the Mummy actor, Brendan Fraser. You can just do a Google with before and after photos of that particular actor. Another was the Pirates of Caribbean actor. What was his name? Johnny Depp. That Amber Heard or whoever, she did not stop attempting to destroy Johnny Depp, and it started from day one or two, continual attempts to destroy, and then she was trying to make false evidences against him. She virtually destroyed him in using tabloids, news articles. His silence was interpreted as weakness, and she went in for the kill. Johnny Depp lost roles, people started to avoid Johnny Depp, and that was finally at that point when Johnny Depp decided to fight back. And finally, he won the legal debate. I mean, won the court case. She lost a lot of money and everything. So, the same ritual, when the woman holds the ego as higher than the spiritual energy that is to be evolved, turns a evil ritual that destroys the spiritual energies. So just the outward form of nothing is nothing. It has to do with soul sacrifices, truth even in death, and so on. Serving something beyond oneself. Why at stages this form of the path is easier is because one can avoid serving own ego, and thus by serving something beyond, uncover that which is beyond the ego, the self. Even people find meaning when they have a family because they have something to serve, whether man or woman. When they have a family, they'll they are ready to often sacrifice their own lives. So in an instant they've gone beyond the ego. So when that is amplified, it is possible to find the beyond principle, the soul planes, the God planes, and so on. If that ritual is slighted, it is dangerous and brings the opposite result. And it is um, when two people are devoted in such a sense, there is joy. So the path is easier in that sense. But if one person has a somewhat slightly weakening attitude, then it is, it has that. If there is a one hole in the bucket, uh, there is no way to hold water, right? Uh, so it has that dual aspect to it. That is, uh, at times it is better to be single, but if somebody is profoundly devoted, then can have an amplifying factor. But I do not think there is anybody uh, in this world which has been educated along false lines who is built on that principle of sacrifice and so on in this era. I might be wrong, but it very much seems that the world is spiraling increasingly into that stage. Like women will sacrifice their marriages, but not their career. Try suggesting taking career slightly to anybody, they'll go violent. Those women, uh, even if they have all the money in the world, if you are dirt poor and you will die if you do not work. Of course, you need to work. You need to stay alive. I'm not arguing. Or maybe you could go sit in the Himalayas and meditate. That would be a better ideal in my option. But if nobody can be blamed for wanting to survive, if that is that bad. But if you are sitting in riches, if you have enough resources, and then becoming survival, or whatever, running after money, then you're deceased in the head, in my opinion. And mental disease, that is one of the worst and the least treatable forms of disease, mental disease. So nothing can be done. The fact that the education takes away from the notion that they can attain to greater things, become something more than live like an earthworm running after money. And that fire of the gods exists in the form of sacrifice, which is why sacred sacrifice and all runs together. It is only lighted in the sacred form. Sacred and sacrifice runs together. Sacrifice does not mean throwing something into some kind of a, the soul's principle of sacrifice. Even if I want to engage study, I have to sacrifice a lot of things, including uh, running in the world for a lot of money. But I know what I gain. This is not done without a plan, reason, or anything. And even if I spiral out without nothing and die, it is not a big deal as long as I get a moment to study something profounder, deeper, understand something more. That attitude needs to be there. There's a story of Archimedes or somebody who dies uh, because a soldier asked him to stop uh, drawing figures on sand. He did not know who Archimedes was. Um, and the Archimedes replies saying, "Stop bothering him," or something. And anyway, the soldier cuts his head. There's another story about some scientist who was guillotined during the French revolutions. So he sets up an experiment, uh, saying, asks his friend to record the number of times he would blink after his head has fallen. So there is another deeper focus for a, a profounder desire for knowledge or to do the right thing. Socrates did not get out of jail because he felt that was not the right thing. That is debatable, whether that was the right thing or not. But sometimes, but I'm giving those examples because something else gets valued more than uh, knowledge. Like Alexander the Great asking Diogenes, uh, offers Diogenes half his kingdom, half his empire. So Diogenes replies to Alexander, saying, "Step out of my view of the sun." That's very profound. View of the sun is view of the profounder truth. So essentially asking Alexander the Great to fuck off, because what he said is not trying to pile up glitter. So that profounder goal sense, that profounder sense need to be there to any endeavor. If it were so easy, I do not know in what kind of world it would be so easily done without any endeavor. That expression of spirit won't be there. The expression of spirit that is there in a difficult situation, such as war, not necessarily war which involves death and all that, but in a difficult situation which demands the principle of a bit of sacrifice, cannot be there in a happy McDonald's framework. There is no way. Assume you are locked up in McDonald's with Happy Meals and TV, and those are the two modes of action there. What can you express there? Nothing. So again, happiness can become a huge trap, so-called outward idea of happiness. So when the attention is elsewhere, nothing happens. I could say this. There might be people from that so-called far-off land listening to this. They listen to this at this point and say, all that is real, but money has its own reality. Money, money, money. Or something along the lines. They'll again say money, money, money. So what happens is at that point, a ritual cannot be sustained without the gods. The gods arrive, seeing beautiful energies. So the energies immediately turn ugly. It is like saying, of course, the gods and all are there, but unless you serve Mammon, Mammon is a demon. There is nothing good that will happen in real terms. Okay, uh, uh, then that is where the person is headed into hells, right? That is where his awareness is. It is not like a curse or anything. It is that is where he is. His awareness is, that is where he or she is clinging on to, biting into with tooth and nail onto uh, the devil's arse and hoping to end up elsewhere is a joke. People go, if you are clinging on to the back of a bullock cart, where will you end up? You'll go where the bullock cart goes. That's all I'm saying. So even that slight bit of thing is what obviates the possibility of those people taking up a profounder endeavor. The, the sense has to arise that the world is shit. There's nothing in the world. No matter what opportunity I get to work for 1 million years in the happiest firm in the world, happiest, or build the biggest company in the world in a land of fools, in a world of fools, those are like getting cursed into hell. There is nothing to it unless I get to evolve myself, experience more, be something more, be free of phenomenon that can drag me down, be free of death even, be free of the threats of death even. Those are uh, the things that uh, get my attention, right? That I what can I be? That is the normal state. That is why so many uh, songs are made on the theme. Metallica Unforgiven, Metallica Hero of the Day, a lot of Linkin Park songs. Uh, People listen to a lot of music like that because people want to aspire to something greater. The kind of religion that is peddled within institutions is often another form of slavery in the hope of glitter elsewhere. The soul is not expressing itself in a truthful sense. They become, a lot of them are just those, this organization, that organization, that kind of spirituality. A lot of them are hypocrites. They learn to behave in a way to please people around them, while in terms of inner substance, they are no different from anybody else. Um, so uh, in the Metallica song "Hero of the Day," the lyrics run something like, "I am not all me, so let me tend to how I feel." That is what is important. The innermost feeling, the deepest feeling, is from the God planes acting through the soul as per the view of ancient traditions. And the individual, for the individual to realize that the innermost soul sense is situated in the not so mundane planes, or is situated in the divine, for that realization to happen, it is not something too fancy. The very majority of people are innately good. I'm not saying uh, everybody else is there. There are things that are polarized in the negative direction. There are things that are totally nonsensical. There are things that are obviously to be avoided. Um, and so on. Just like when one is walking along a street or on a journey, there are things that are to be avoided. There are things that are dangerous. There are things that are nonsensical. If one steps into a forest, one has to be wary of snakes or whatever, and so on. Priority is important, and the truth theory is also important. A truth theory is not devoid of a physical understanding of reality, mathematical physics, logic, the presence of dimensions, what the human form itself is, the way the perception of the human form arises. Some people uh, are extremely devoted and seem to have their priority toward their so called devotion, which often tends to be an idea of, if I pray 25 times a day, I'll go to heaven. If I bomb uh, a different land, then uh, They seem to be serving their devotion. All those are false understandings. That is what gives the idea of spirituality a bad name as well. Devotion is the, like in the Coldplay song, Scientists. Let's go back to the start, coming back as we are. Let's go back to the start, let's go back to the origin, coming back as we are, as in the sense in the perfection of it. It's not about how much money you have, whether you're rich or poor. The palace and the cottage are equally good. Sometimes, if at this moment, at this stage I am in, if I want an ideal place to evolve, I would think of a small cottage somewhere in a very pristine place, or a university setting, a very happy palatial mansion, wide open spaces, and a few people serving in empty halls. That is not conducive to my improvement. Why? Because the energies are scattered in such an environment. Scattered in the sense, try standing in a wide open empty hall. I was told that in ancient Chinese palaces, the emperor's chamber, there is a bedroom, would be small with almost closed walls, because the energy had to swirl inward and upward. Um, at a stage, there is the downward movement too, from the, that is called the grace. There is a rising and the descending. But for all that to happen, there has to be a kind of a closed framework. Like, again, I'll give you the example of McDonald's. If you go sit in a McDonald's thing all day, do you think your brain would be in a state of evolution? Or think of a really happy workplace. Lots of toys you can play around anytime, and you're working on some project that you like. But all those things are superficial, right? And the energies are all blur. There is no intensity to that. If I'm with one hardbound text in a cottage, or reading in some beautiful but far away place, pondering profoundly what I read. It could be, I'm not talking about reading scriptures or anything alone. Even the study of mathematics, one can penetrate into the profounder reality through the symbol. What is it that appears as the mathematical form? What is it in the underlying world machine that takes on the form of this mathematical thing, albeit through all the distortions? So that profounder pondering away from noise in a simple setting can evolve. If that is done, say, suppose in a simple, faraway village somewhere, a beautiful village, soulful people, a few soulful people, like those fairy tale towns, and you'll see in the movies, the kind of fairy tale towns you see in the movies, uh, or somewhere where nature is beautiful, like the Alps or somewhere. The Himalayas are gone; they're completely polluted. People are running for money. The people's souls have been made zombie. The only reality in people's brains is money. So, in an ideal setting, uh, a simple setting, I'm saying, with uh, depth, nature, can be better for evolution than a fanciful, wide open setting. So, can the intensity of the ritual, say, of a university degree, alchemized to serve the profounder purpose. By alchemizing it, I mean, just as I gave the example of mathematics, one could just study the symbols on paper and repeat it, or one could alchemize it by seeking the profounder in the symbols of the ritual. There, one might be reading uh, a normal mathematics text, but one's thoughts are scanning through the profundity. Along the world machine, the symbols continually keep on unveiling what is profound. What is being engaged is not a degree for grades, marks, or job, etc., but what is being engaged in the depths is this ritual unveiling the profound knowledge. It needn't be just mathematics. Somebody studying, say, French cuisines or cuisines anywhere, uh, if they are exploring the alchemy of phenomenon that appears as food and how it transforms the awareness psyche and how it can enable an access to the profounder. Again, it's the same thing. If somebody is studying music, any kind of music, or engaging music, even if they have not properly studied music, if there is that profounder goal, it can alchemize the process. But mathematics, being foundational to what phenomenon itself is, holds a higher place in my view in that endeavor. Plato had written that God is always doing mathematics. So, mathematics or geometry, God is always doing geometry or something of an idea along the lines. Um, in a simple sense, because the world machine is mathematical, it has its vectors and dimensional vectors, operators, spins, and so forth, which are all of a purely mathematical nature, held and driven by the awareness, held and driven by individual awarenesses in different DNA pockets and 0 points. So once you understand a way of traveling the path, it could be have an understanding of Zen, um, or anything, an overall understanding of the path is there. There needs to be a deep devotion to that process and attending to the process. It, like I said earlier, it cannot be like my major goal is to go to work and come back, um, and I do Zen for this and that, just for the ease, entertainment, and whatever. So that there are these Zen videos by a Zen teacher named Hinark. So there is this tech dude with a bald head who is a wannabe Zen student, who comes to this German Zen teacher to learn Zen. So they have their, if you search HINNERK, Hinark Zen, you'll see those meditation videos. So that's one 15-minute meditation video. So at the end of the session, uh, Hinark does a namaste. In Zen, they bow a lot. He does a bow and a namaste. So the student is like, it's good. You can, it's good. He is also asking other people to subscribe and all. In the middle of that, he says it's good. So the master bows and the student says it is good. The whole ritual is destroyed. The master becomes a clown, the student is a clown, the whole setting is a clown's face. Uh, in another of those videos, he goes like, I do Zen is like a tool for me. I do this because my whatever. He's one of those, Steve Job monkeys. You had a lot of them in one era. Everybody wanted to be Steve Jobs, while he was probably an actor for the fucking deep state. All of them are at the top. Otherwise, they cannot be in that position. They bring out these technology, which is brought out by alien species like the reptilians and all, attempting to control society. The mobile is a control device, and there are chips that generate unique frequencies on each mobile that allow portals to be opened wherever that thing is held. Each thing is and they had this purpose of, operant conditioning. If somebody is not behaving the way they want to behave, 5G and those technologies can be used to amplify waves at there, and even other invisible technology can be used to give psychological shocks to that person. There is an invisible layer of matrix. Like I said, portals can be opened. An underlying invisible layer of AI can monitor people's behavior, can monitor people's fields. If somebody's field is brightening up, the machines will set to work to harm that person. So, this so-called mobile technology, which in every fool's view even has destroyed society, was brought out as a way of tagging, as a way of making animal farms out of human societies, destroying society as a whole. So, and these technological firms are bringing out these things. Like you see a technology firm which has the goal of 100,000 satellites around the earth. Do you think an individual was there building rocket technology and whatever? It was set up by the governmental organizations, and it functions under the cover of a private company by these reptilian governmental organizations attempting to control humans as a whole. If they say the the American government wants to put 100,000 satellites in the sky, everybody is going to fight the idea. If they say an individual wants to put 100,000 satellites in the sky, everybody will be amazed. While that is a controlled individual, and it is not their fault either entirely, because they are controlled. They do not have an option. So, and it is not possible for an individual to run 7 or 8 companies, one of which is satelliting, another of which has to do with putting chips in people's brains. So there is an agenda at work. Once the satellites and brains are in place, this is an alien animal farm. An animal farm for the aliens, that is. Mm, so, yeah, in that video, this particular individual who wants to study Zen, but his whole attitude is he wants to be like Steve Jobs. So the questions are like, what is the role of technology in Zen? What is the role of leadership in Zen? Absolute retard. The goal of Zen is not that, and the Zen master will keep on making a fool of himself by dealing with these kinds of people. In ancient days, they would not encourage uh, these types of people. But now nobody seems to have any interest, and some people seem to be interested for false reasons. I assume they they would engage those people, and the whole quality of the ritual goes down. Whole quality of the Zen space goes down. It is like a show off, a style. To do Zen is kind of shameful, it is spirituality. But if you say Zen is like a tool for me, man, then people are programmed to think that the person is somehow so strong, independent, epic, just dealing with tools. Everything is a tool. His wife is also a tool, and they are programmed to admire people like that. Uh, while they are substanceless in reality. How can a person who thinks his own soul doesn't exist, and he is in a bunch of tools, he is in the midst of a bunch of tools, be anything? Like, I do not know. How can a man be a man if his source of strength is absent in his head, in his awareness? How can a woman be a woman if everything that she sees appears as a quote unquote tool to her? It'll be something that is entirely trashy. So that's what these things are. To talk like that is easy. To talk like that, put it on social media and get likes is easy. People will be impressed if you talk like that. But is there substance to back up that talk? Nothing. If people wanted tools, why approach Zen? That is like, in other words, what that individual is saying is he does not even know he has a soul or whatever that can evolve. He exists to build the machine, and even Zen and his ability to meditate, breathe, everything exists as a tool. So is his brain and soul. Soul he doesn't have because he thinks he doesn't have it. Uh, so it is at least not in connection with whatever is there in the brain. So everything, including his brain, everything is a tool to build a something, And if you peddle that something, hawk it around in fancy ways, the bankers will give you some money, and then the individual will become so happy when he gets some money, and then he can show a lot of arrogance. Again, arrogance cannot be shown in such a society because society restrains people a lot. People will lose their good name, good fame, everything if arrogance is shown. Then, so showing arrogance is also not possible, even if they want to do that. The other thing that is advertised, uh, lot of hedonistic pleasures. Uh, Assume you're young and you attempt hedonistic pleasures for a few weeks, I think you'd be on the path to getting deceased. So that is also not a reality, whatever they might use visual media to present it as. You might have an option of visiting a war house nearby, right? Would you abandon your family and visit it and become happy? There might be a lot of tools available. Most of us would hesitate, right? Because we know that it is diseases there and there is no happiness there. Hedonism does not lead to happiness. So, what are you going to do with the money? And the other thing, everybody is on a gradual path of decay in terms of health after, say, age 30, unless on the path of immortality. So those are all false advertisements. Do you want to be like George Soros or somebody deceased? Do you want to be like uh, so-called the false King Charles, whose wife Diana made a total, you know, Buckingham Palace out of Buckingham Palace? That's what I always say. Do you want to be that kind of a quote-unquote king? The so-called prince looks like the individual Diana ran away with. So I assume they're not a bunch of extra happy people, right? It is also the false reptilian royalty, and a lot of things like that are done on purpose by them, um, attempting to destroy the idea of the royal ritual, setting up false ideas for society, entirely because their existence depends upon destroying and weakening human ideas, because they are the reptiles. Take any of their photos and compare it to the image of a stereotypical reptilian. They look very similar. And they have admitted they were cannibalistic. From one of those fortresses or whatever of one of those ladies uh, related to the royalty in England, they found 800 dead bodies. She was feeding on the blood. Is it human? The cannibalism in royalty has been admitted, and now they run false articles saying the royalty were cannibalistic. They used to feed on pills made out of mummy dust, of Egyptian mummy dust. That's a way of covering it up. They used to feed on humans. From where did the story? It's a real story of uh, Vlad Dracula, Count Dracula, appear. They are in the same lineage actually. It is glorified Dracula now because they run the media, but in reality, it is not so glorious. It is just murder and eating human flesh. So that why I got into that topic is that is the royalty, so called in this world. So getting into that royalty stage, even if they allow you to climb into those circles, is worth nothing. It's something one shouldn't do and wouldn't want to do. So on the path, one needs to a profound devotion to the path itself. Otherwise, it will end up making a joke out of everything, out of own path, out of like that fool made a joke out of the idea of Zen even. In my case, I do not go for long-term relationships for the sake of it. Of course, as I've said, I view marriage as marriage for the purpose of marriage as sacred. Otherwise, it is hardly a marriage. Um, and it is not something for entertainment, so to speak, or to be, or something dull to be held on to. When people are in a totally mortal state, of course, people have their limitations, what they can do. But I have found it reasonable to not be foolish and get into long term relationships with things that are diseased in the brain. Otherwise, it is a very beautiful and divine thing. Why I made this slide is that for people who have a that kind of framework, married or whatever, it is beneficial if um, both the partners have the attention on where attention should be, which is their evolution and which is the fucking reason why they got married in the first place, which was the fucking definition of marriage when they invented marriage, which has been there from time immemorial. Uh, it is not like the theory of evolution. So um, that is why to this day marriages are done in a sacred sense and not done in pubs or anywhere. Uh, but that is if both the partners can find the proper attention, give the proper attention, not in the sense of giving a little bit of change to it, and the real thing is whatever social media plus going to work and returning. Um, if they can find the right focus, then the path would be easy and joyous because there is that framework and the force of the marriage ritual or whatever that can potentially serve the path. Because that is so rare, it is rare in this world for one in a million to want to walk the authentic path because people are so caught up in the glitter. Uh, the two in a million possibilities even more rare. So alone is powerful, extremely powerful. There is nothing diluting oneself, and it is epic AF. So I was just watching this small talk from uh, based on a book called The Law of One by some alien entity that wanted its words to be channeled. Based on some books called The Law of One by Ra, the entity called itself Ra. Um, anyway, it speaks of these demonic entities, people who end up getting polarized in that direction. They have the ability to uh, usually present a very polished appearance. It can even be, if you look at, I've said these serial killers sometimes have a very smooth way of talking. Visual appearance, wielding at least temporarily extremely glitter, apparently outwardly deceptive appearance is one of the abilities. It arises, as per that talk, from the way I understood, partly because of that narcissistic focus they have. They are extremely focused on the physicality as a way of deceiving the world. So it also arises across lifetimes, but they can flip into a very ugly form as well. That a strong sense of narcissism would be there. um, a focus on material gains. What material gain can they get? Like that. So, people also live in the notion that the physical body can be served forever. Physical body just under one thin millimeter of skin, which can be harmed by even the slightest blade, is just intestines, shit, and all that. I was watching this war videos from Ukraine. Of course, Ukraine was entertaining all these satanic forces from the West. They had these bio labs engineering, attempting to engineer um, all these pathogens, particularly targeting Slavic people and so forth. Those satanists had their grip very powerfully on Ukrainian, the way they usually do, they rolled Ukraine up into a ball and threw it against Russia. Russia kept warning Ukraine against that for a long time. Russia is extremely justified and very virtuous in the way they are handling it. They have not even used any weapon of mass destruction, while these people who are speaking of sanctions and all have destroyed entire societies for weapons that do not exist. Weapons of mass destruction, the lie has been used to destroy Middle East. They create these conflicts and then imbalance the region to bring their forces there. So anyway, I was watching those footage, so all those fancy tanks from Germany and wherever, that was destroyed by Russia. So you see soldiers lying dead and the Russian soldiers are walking. It is war, so they go out and search for ammunition, medicine, or whatever they can find. It's a war field, right? Supplies are difficult. So, um, so it's a bit horrifying. The explosion had gone through the gut of a Ukrainian soldier, and the intestines and shit had all out there. So all the fancy arrogance boils down to that. So the Buddhists especially had that sense of, or that way of reminding people of the temporary nature of reality. Saying underneath the tiny surface of skin which can be cut by a blade, it is all mucus, intestines, shit and all. People fancy their bodies thinking it'll last forever. It is prone to all kinds of disasters. It will decay and die in no time also. Cannot be preserved no matter how you serve it, unless you achieve the so-called spiritual immortality. Unless you achieve immortality, that is, physical immortality. Even for that purpose, the Buddhists have an exercise of reminding oneself that own body can end up like a decaying corpse. If you hold that state for just a second, you'll find a sudden spark, like the awareness suddenly receiving a jolt. It is reminded of the truth. And the awareness begins to fill the body. In fact, that is a way of going one step nearer the immortal state, because it is the awareness itself and the body as non-dual. So I'm saying they have it as an exercise. It's not only done for the purpose of reminding oneself of impermanence, but it is done for the purpose of the awareness getting a jolt. Jolt as in like a shock. And without evolution, it is psychological and physical weakening. Without evolution of the awareness, I've said this many times, but it can be said a billion times and still people can be immune to the idea. But so one has to repeat it when discussing these topics for the context, quote unquote. For the context does not exist in 99 people, 99% or almost nobody's brains, no matter how many times people might uh, be told of the idea. So nobody is a gymming protoplasm. You build muscles, gym, and then everybody will appreciate you and you'll become so happy. That is absurd unless you're that kind of an entity. I do not know what kind of thing derives happiness from that. Um, and there is more potential for evolution, and that being the core point, than a gymming piece of protoplasm has. A piece of protoplasm that can eat, gym, and entertain oneself through sensory stimuli, that is not what the human is. That is a lie fed to the human so that it can be kept in control within this um, exopolitic, alien controlled space that Earth has become. And so that they will function only to build the machinery that controls humankind as a whole. So that gets into people's heads as if it were the norm of things, as if it is normal to behave that way. It is not normal, it is deceased. A few decades ago, a woman who was focused on gymming, building her career, being whatever, would have been thought of as mentally deceased. And you are seeing how they have destroyed society. and themselves. Depression rates are highest among them. So when you think how empty as a fool going around, see my gymming muscles, it makes me so happy when people appreciate that. Or a woman minting money and see my new plastic surgery and virtual reality augmentation. It's so happy when everybody appreciates that. No, it cannot be happy for beyond a few days, even for them. Of course, they have to sustain that deceased pattern, for they do not know anything else. So another option is to, since I'm discussing possibilities of meaningful action, mint a lot of money, get deceased, take happy photos, post on social media saying, see how happy I am, or see how another thing is those people in so-called happy social media marriages, see how happy the marriage is in social media, because they are not, not satisfied with the marriage overall feeling of things in the marriage. Um, Another social media pattern is they post happy food for likes. When social media emerged, people thought of it as an entertainment, but that is dead now. It cannot be adopted as a form of existence. Or somewhere people seek joys. They are bringing in virtual reality. This social media plugs the brain so powerfully into it that people cannot free themselves from it. People can no longer interact normally. How much more powerful would be virtual reality? Um, Another thing is somehow travel makes people happy. I have seen people who travel and they are some of the loneliest, saddest, and most empty people, even if they are visiting the most happiest places on earth. There is nobody that knows you in a deeper sense. There is not even a well meaning hello or how are you. Uh, and all that one sees, meets are strangers. Stays can be expensive, it cannot be afforded unless one has a lot of money. You do not find celebrities doing that. Celebrities tend to want to settle with yet another failed marriage and a simple home. Uh, so that is also why I'm saying this is people need to explore what options they have for a meaningful existence. So again, marriage without substance is destructive, as in staying alone without substance is destructive. Social media pretending to be happy is destructive. Being a lot of arrogant shows is utterly destructive. Uh, So-called happy travel pretensions are finally empty. They lose quality, in fact, especially if a woman travels around a lot, tends to travel around a lot. Nobody in the right brain would want to be with such a woman, because uh, it is not uh, somebody with uh, depth in character that has found purpose in just hopping around here and there, seeing glitter, getting overexcited about glitter, uh, going another place and seeing again more glitter. With the visual media, this gets glorified. Let me ask you, why are you not traveling around then? There must be a lot of beautiful lakes and places wherever in the world you are. Because the mind is not seeking just a bit of visual input. If you wanted visual input, do you visit the Happy Mall and cinema every day? No, because you do not do so because there is an absence of deeper substance. I'm not saying everybody who travels is one way or the other. That's not my point. Uh, my point is, if a person is so empty, that the person can derive worth, can derive substance, a sense of being, everything from some empty display and live like that, it is better avoided. Uh, Now it's a bit different for me, but previously my mind wouldn't be at ease unless um, I could figure what the underlying mathematical nature of reality is. Not that I have fully figured it out now, but as might be kind of obvious, I'm approaching the state where uh, the entire mathematics would be apparent. The way it functions, the dimensions are structured, and so forth. Uh, So no matter what kind of worldly success, that absence of the knowledge I should gain or understanding of the way to evolve that I should gain would drive me to depression. Depression in the sense, a sense of emptiness. People get so excited when they get a job in a fancy company. When I got a job in a so-called fancy company, I threw myself out of there after a year. I had an accident, in fact, and that was engineered by my own being. At the end of the accident, I knew uh, I did not feel fear or anything. I felt like I was not attending to what I should do. In the sense, I wanted to study things for my own, and so I made a kind of vow, like in the Metallica song Unforgiven, vow to myself that they won't take my wind away again. I will do what I want to do, which is studies in the profoundest sense. Of course, every kid's will is taken away. Nobody wants to go to school in the first place. There's nothing profoundly being done. Those are people of limited intelligence, um, teaching the same foolish things in roundabout ways, torturing kids over nothing. And the less their knowledge of the subject, the greater the methods of punishment and not physical torture, psychological torture they'll employ. People do not gain a profound understanding of any field. And that ritual happens even now when everything can be put online and a very beautiful system of gamified education be built. This ritual happens of universities, this and that, which is entirely almost unneeded, unless, of course, it has its ritual aspects that are good. But I'm saying, uh, with this kind of education that is targeted at just building AI and whatnot, and data science, which is just data collection on humans done for the aliens, by humans themselves, for the reptilians and other parasitic species, because another layer of it is necessary to control humans and study them, to study how they can be manipulated, controlled further. That is, in fact, the way research functions. If you look at it, a great amount of research is along those lines. So at that point, I felt there is no point living that way, right? Going to work. I never wanted to do that because, but you have to do that to please society, not out of need of money, out of need to please society. So ultimately, that incident was engineered by nothing outside, by my own being. Uh, and then there was a sense of rebellion and wanting to walk my own path. But at that point, I had no other regret. That was the um, amazing thing. No fear, no regret. There was a deep sense of peace. But that one regret was that I had not done what I wanted to do, which was study all these fields. I wanted to study the symbolism of ancient languages, ancient Chinese. I wrote a few books afterwards. But then, when at that point, you cannot even express your plans to society. Right? You cannot say, "I'm going to study Chinese." You'll get attacked. That is basically what I went through. But then, right now, they cannot. They do not have the ability to do that. The people will, when you defy society, people will want to see you fail. When people, even immediate people who seem initially to advise out of a sense of apparent goodwill, will soon flip into wanting to make, self-fulfilling prophecies. Because if the other person fails, this person's point of view becomes right. So one has to stand own ground, and with a spirit of avoiding and fighting society often to make progress. If the society's views were good, it would have benefited society. Is it? The society out there is hellish, and everybody agrees that at this stage. This is like right after the COVID era, 2020, 2001, 2022, 2023. This is engineered viruses, people walking around in mass, uh, and there is no other purpose to society rather than building a bit of glitter. There is family frameworks falling away world over. People do not care for own family, do they care for friends? So there has, and the only purpose that becomes to somehow eat food, fancy food, or travel to fancy places, see things, become happy, announce happiness. Uh, and that does not work because, again, when you go to different places, those are just normal human places. These happy places are where they have assisted suicides even because society has fallen into that level of emptiness. Who would allow anybody of their family to undergo a suicide process? Because they do not care. And they, on individual planes, they end up behaving to each other in ways such that caring for each other becomes an insult to each other's spirit. If suppose, assume a woman gets married to somebody and her only job is to do narcissistic insults, the care in reverse is to throw one's own soul out. It's like those 90s uh, songs were kind of soulful, right? Like the Backstreet Boys song, uh, If I Don't Have You, I'm a Star with No Light. Uh, a day with no night, a star with no light. So songs like that were soulful, and that can be, one could theoretically serenade a beautiful, soulful girl with that during one's younger days. Assume what happens when the same action is done uh, to a very arrogant, self-sufficient, thinking self-sufficient, lives like a rat of the supermarket and slaving for the industries and bankers, very in a very meek and pitiful way. But thinks it is self-sufficient, super intelligent, smart, arrogant, doesn't mean anything. Assume such a girl, but very extremely pretty, polished looks. Uh, Somebody or oneself is forced to sing, uh, if I don't have you, I'm a star with no light, a day with no night. That is like getting kicked in the balls, the spine getting thrown out, the soul struggling, the body cringing, the fingers getting drawn and the toes getting curled up, and the whole system is in rebellion and the soul wants to escape. So the first thing put the soul in place, the God and soul entered the body. The second thing did the literal opposite. So one cannot have a soulful expression or a soulful interaction in a world that is programmed out of death, where people do not have what is now labeled spiritual depth, which is just the normal depth of beings, because the universe is what it is. It is not functioning under labels, spirituality, physicality, reality, mentality, and whatnot. Option of soulful action to get happier would be a new nuclear submarine.